r/AskReddit. Eerie towns, disappearing diners, and creepy gas stations. What's your true, unexplained story of being in a place that shouldn't exist? Part 2. Was driving through Illinois to get to Chicago about a decade ago with a group of friends, and we stopped at a Taco Bell. The first thing we noticed was that the workers were acting very odd. Everything they said was monotone and rehearsed. After sitting in this fairly busy restaurant for a bit, we kind of all just looked at each other at the same time as we realized that none of the conversations happening around us made any sense. The people were speaking, and it was English, but the sentences weren't logical. They were just saying words at each other. We didn't say much about it until we got outside, at which point we all freaked out and confirmed each other's experiences at once and got the fuck out of there. We jokingly refer to that place as the NPC training center, since the people didn't seem to be real, or they were learning how to be human or something. Still freaks me out. Edit. Yes, I believe the orders were all correct, which I guess just ups the creepy factor. Edit 2. We were young and actually pretty straight edge at the time. None of us were high or anything. Edit 3. The best I can remember about the weird conversations was that they were stringing several prepositions in a row with no real sentence structure, forced laughter and nodding, stuff like that. Like they were mimicking how humans talk. Think of those what English sounds like to a non-speaker videos on YouTube, but everybody was doing it all around us. Not creepy, just weird to me. A music store seemed to just show up in my town. I'd lived here 3 years and never saw it. Went in, and the guy had one bass guitar in the store. Me, being a bassist, played it and fell in love. Bought it, and then the next week, when I was in town, the store was totally empty and looked like it hasn't been open in a long time. Got a new bass out of it though, so I'm cool with it being a spooky ghost store. Did the bass mysteriously already have your name on the case? Were you able to play much better with this bass than any other instrument? Was the sales contract strangely long, with large portions of fine print? No. The shop had a strange name. What was it? Oh, Needful Things. Old dude in there, very nice but slightly menacing. By my hometown there was a hiking trail that people went to very infrequently. It was along the side of the Niagara Escarpment, so it had some climbable cliffs and some very shallow caves that you could crawl around on. I went with some friends when I was 19/20, and we were crawling around and found a cave that went pretty deep. We had never been in there before, had never even seen it before. So we pushed forward and decided to check it out, even though we had no flashlights, and this was when cell phones didn't really have a flashlight function. We stepped into the cave, and it was easily 20 to 30 degrees cooler than outside. Upon looking around with which light we had, we noticed it was really clean inside the cave, as in it didn't have beer cans littered everywhere like all the other small caves did. While in there we got a really eerie feeling, after being in there shortly, hearing weird and strange things. Feeling like we were being touched, poked and pulled, and not having any way to figure out who was doing it, because it was too dark. We were just using lighters to see what was around us. We were convinced one of us was messing with the others. Although anytime we sparked up a lighter, we were all decently far apart. We decided to hightail it out of there after only a few minutes, convinced to come back with flashlights. We came out to see that it was now dusk outside. When we entered it was midday. Somehow we had lost roughly 3 hours inside of this cave. We went back with flashlights the next week, but have never been able to find this cave again. Natural gas leak, if that's a thing. It's odorless naturally, or some other type of gas leak causing oxygen deprivation. Lost time, uneasy feelings, hallucinations. Edit. Before anyone else says, but wouldn't it have caught fire with the lighters natural gas might have, but carbon monoxide or some other gases wouldn't have? I posted this on Let's Not Meet a while back. This story takes place in the mid-90s, a time before widely used cell phones and GPS. My two best friends and I, freshly able to drive, decided we would head out on a Saturday to a water park in southern Missouri, about a 3-hour drive from our hometown in northwest Arkansas. We had never been before and just used road maps to get there. We had pretty fantastic time, but as the sun started to reach the tree line we thought we ought to head home. It's about 7 o'clock, and we miss a turn, but my friend Paul, who was navigating, Said not to worry, another turn was coming up that would get us there just as fast. The next turn took us from detoured to completely lost. By 8 o'clock we are on a road that seemed to be lacking in informative road signs and zero lights. We finally see a gas station and are relieved to get some directions as well as some gas. My friend Taylor and I go inside while Paul pumps the gas. We come inside and a very friendly old man in his early 60s who gives us a very large grin and says we yell hello there. It was very Foghorn Leghorn-esque. Looked like an extreme hillbilly but very pleasant. We explained that we were needing gas and wanted to fill up. He explained that he was about to shut down for the night but would be happy to oblige us. He then said something I'll never forget. You have to make haste though. Tonight is buffer night. Taylor and I looked at each other and shared an awkward look. We asked him if he could point out our location on the road map. While he was finding it, two people entered the shop from the back and called out for the old man. He said he was up front. The two approached us, a man and a woman, and at first looked confused, then, as though hit with an epiphany, they smiled. They asked the old man, are these the guests tonight? He shot them a look and said no, these are some lost children. The way he said children caused the hairs on my neck to stand up. Not sure why. They looked at us and said the three of you should make haste because tonight is buffer night. Two things scared the shit out of me right then. The first being, how did they know about Paul pumping gas out front when they came from the back, and the second being that they repeated the old man verbatim. We clarified the directions to get back on a main highway and paid for the gas without waiting for change. Taylor and I booked it out of the gas station to find Paul already in the passenger seat. When we got into the car we were nearly airborne from the speed we took off. Before we could say anything, Paul told us about how three men from across the street stood under a tree just watching him. He waved but they didn't move a muscle. We just drove as fast as we could until we got back to the highway. To this day I will still have a nightmare every so often about that gas station and what my imagination has twisted buffer night into being. That would be funny if they just had shitty accents and they meant it's all you can eat catfish buffet night down at the diner. 1. There is a town right near me in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Lincoln Way in Clairton, Pennsylvania, where a whole street full of families disappeared overnight back in the 70s. Everything, bills, food, clothes, etc., was left behind. No trace of them to this day. You can go on Google Maps and look it up. The houses are abandoned and almost closed off from the rest of the town. 2. There was another instance that I'll never forget. I read it here on a creepiest Google Map places. A man in Canada decided to drive until the highway stopped sometime in the past couple years. I believe he started in Winnipeg and kept going N/NW until he ran out of road, about 1 to 2 hours. Before he got to that point, he saw a lot of cars parked off the side of the road. Keep in mind that there wasn't a single gas station or store nearby and hasn't seen a house for quite some time. There was a lot of about 30 to 35 cars, old cars, one to say from the 50s or 60s, and in the distance he saw a cabin entrance that was faintly illuminated by light. He noticed the tail end of a group of people dressed in all black walking in. No signs were around advertising it, and he said he couldn't find anything about it on Google Maps. He posted this a year ago, and that trip was even further back from that. I reached out and tried to get any markers on nearby areas I could do my own research by, but he said he could not remember specifics. Still makes me wonder to this day what was going on there. Many years ago, my family and I moved from California to Nebraska. I was still a young kid, probably 5 to 6 years old. We were driving through Nevada, and shortly after Las Vegas, and we needed to stop and fuel up. We stopped at your typical old school gas station that rings when you pull up to the pump. I don't remember it that well, but my dad told me it looked normal. He got out to stretch while my mom went inside to pay for gas. My mom said that when she walked in, the gas station had quite a few people inside, despite us being the only car there. When she walked up to the counter to pay for gas, everyone turned to her and the lights went out. She ran outside where my dad witnessed everything and helped her into the car, and we sped off down the interstate, not caring whether we ran out of gas or not. To this day, my mom says that's one of her scariest encounters because she can't explain nor figure out exactly what was going on. And yes, we found a better gas station down the road and made it to Nebraska. The townspeople probably remember your family and still ponder WTF that was all about. They were probably just as freaked out. Some lady walks in, and when everyone turns to look at her, the lights go out. Not just one, but there's a whole lot of places in rural NZ that will scare the shit out of someone who isn't used to it. Hell, even some of my Kiwi friends would sometimes be like, "F no, I'm not hiking out there with you guys. Good luck." If I had to choose one, we were doing a 5-day hike, had pretty good maps and directions. Now there's a lot of nationally funded huts throughout the island, very well marked. We found this one random hut that was definitely not on the maps, with a bunch of older guys just hammered partying inside. And this was way out of where these guys cold just walked up from town to party in for the afternoon. No gear whatsoever, just the craziest looking 60+ guys hammered in this random unmarked cabin. When we came back by later, the place was absolutely empty and musty, so they packed up their trash and stuff, but it still seemed all gross and dirty. We were all kind of baffled. Did we actually meet all these crazy hillbilly old men partying in the middle of nowhere? They obviously weren't going up there to clean it up. And where the hell did this cabin even come from just in the middle of these mountains? And how did they just randomly hike up there with cases of beer and booze and speakers? There's this old abandoned hotel a couple hours away from me. It's not like a modern hotel, but like an old Victorian house that was turned into a B&B. It's totally boarded up, big fence around it with barbed wire. Apparently it's pretty damn haunted. In high school, me and some friends went to go check it out. It's in the middle of this circular road, not a roundabout, but you can go around several times before feeding back onto the main road. It takes about 90 seconds to go around this circle. Anyway, the first time we drive through, all the shades on the windows are drawn. We drive around again, only half of the shades are drawn. The next time we drive by, all the shades are open. We drove around one last time and all the shades were drawn again. We freaked out and drove the hell out of there. You probably freaked them out by driving by multiple times while they tried to get a good look and ultimately pulled the shades back down. Edit, and I meant the squatters. You probably freaked out the squatters. Squatters are reason enough to haul us out of there. 10 years ago, my friend and I were bored one night and were driving around. We were on a highway in NJ about 30 minutes from our houses, and through the trees in the middle of nowhere we see this beautiful freshly paved cement pathway with lampposts every 100 feet just lighting this pathway up. It was beckoning to us, and so we found the nearest exit. We drove around for a while through darkness until the road came to a dead end and the path began. We got out and started walking on this path through the trees and these beautiful wide open fields until eventually it ends at a little small town after a couple miles. At this point it's like 2 AM and a small town like this nothing should be open except for this pizzeria, which is odd. So we go in. It is empty except for the older gentleman behind the counter. We order and start eating. Then another older customer walks in. The gentleman behind the counter and this customer do a double take at each other and then smile. Both of them run around the counter and embrace. Mario. Stefano. What has it been, 40 years? They talk the whole time about their childhood and growing up back in Italy. We think, what are the chances we would be here at this moment, seeing friends reunited after 40 years? Just plain odd. My friend and I, we finish up and we head back down the brightly lit path and back to the car and call it a night. Ever since that night my friend and I tried to find that brightly lit path, but to no avail. We haven't seen it since from the highway or driving down that road. In the small town the pizzeria is there, but it closes at 10 PM, so no explanation why it would be open at 2 AM. Just plain odd and something we never could explain. Experiencing an unlikely moment to watch friends be reunited after 40 years. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe.